everyone
Hola a
present in
todas
this
las
second
personas que nos
session of
acompañan en esta
this
segunda sesión
transference and
de
experience exchange with the brick-making sector. My name is Sandra Villalobos, consultant of the Environmental Entrepreneurial Corporation, CAEM, and I'm in charge of the articulation of the productive sector in public policies, air qualities, and we have as a reference this experience in this sector. In the first session, on October the 1st, was very important because we let know the public policy in Colombia that we have in Colombia and the southeast of Asia. And especially we had experiences with Nepal. We were also able to have the participation of Catalina Echeverry in representation of the Clean Air Coalition, Paola Herrera, director of the Entrepreneurial Environmental Corporation, CAEM, and Mr. Pedraza from the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development of Colombia, and representatives of EasyMod, which is the Center of Knowledge, Mr. Vijay Pradesh. The whole session had several interventions, mainly related to public policies. The participation of the Ministry of Environment told us the most relevant policies in relation of air quality and environment. This ministry has a national strategy for air quality with very important interinstitutional, intersectorial activities. Significant advances have been done in the discussion groups, articulation with the brick-making sector, whereby they have exchanged, modified, transformed, overhauled certain brick-making kilns that were very aircraft, and hundreds of those have changed into more technified ones. There's a long way to go anyways in matters of public policies and application of this overhauling or transformation of these aircraft kilns. In Nepal, we had the presentation of the environmental department, where Mr. Vitra told us about the evolution of the technology of their brick-making kilns. They have been implementing these changes of technology, keeping in mind the recent transformation of the most rudimentary kilns they have in Nepal, which has challenges for them because most of their kilns are very aircraft. One significant element is that the most important city of Nepal is Kathmandu, and it contributes with 30% of pollution from the brick-making sector because it focuses a lot of kilns in that city. Nevertheless, changes and standards, emission standards, have been introduced as in Colombia as in Nepal, and this made to start seeing similarities between Colombia and Nepal, between our countries. The Entrepreneurial Environmental Corporation told us their experiences with the brick-making sector, and they found since 2005 a trajectory of sectorial intervention that within alliances, public-private institutional alliances, they have had stages, milestones of intervention, processes of energetic efficiency, for example, strengthening associations, differentiation, stakeholders, and sectorial instances such as the mesas sectoriales. These are discussion groups with the brick-making sector in Colombia, since there's transference and interaction with other countries in order to grow these experiences with the sector. And such experiences could be used by other production sectors in Colombia. In the experiences that the Entrepreneurial Environmental Corporation has developed, basically, they collect in a guideline of articulation This guideline is intended to see three main significant elements. The first one is the health of people, how to improve environments since there's change in the production sector, citizens, and build a public policy that is focused in the sector where governance that has to do with the improvement, articulation between public and private sectors, stakeholders, companies, associations, academy, general citizens can find instances of dialogue for the benefit of public policies and their own benefit. This has direct link to the community. The entrepreneurial sector decreases their negative impact because of morbidity and mortality and affectations associated to their workers and the surrounding communities because of poor air quality. The second element is how to promote, push better governance with this public-private dialogue. This is the guideline we propose. We collect experiences in order to improve the dialogue instances and strategies and interventions with difference. So, brick-making companies, for example, they have several stakeholders and they had a classification according to their capacities, the number of employees, the number of sales, above all. So the proposition of the Entrepreneurial Corporation KM is that the public policies have a difference precisely according to the needs, and according to that, there's difference in intervention. It means that the work is too big because the idea is to characterize from a series of steps how to articulate. And the third element has to do with the sustainable production for competitiveness of companies. What does it mean? It means that not only companies should implement standards in air quality, but also they need to implement improvements in their competitiveness and articulate with the planning, regional and territorial planning, locally, regionally, nationally. So this is more or less the proposal of articulation summarized in this info we have in this slide. We took the data from Colombian information and from other countries. So we're going to implement a series of differentiated strategies of intervention in the brickmaking sector. There are three classifications, three levels or entrepreneurial scales we have. The aircraft brick makers, the middle-sized companies, and big-sized brick-made companies that they respond to experiences and different needs, and they require a differentiated intervention, a differentiated policy, differentiated response from the government. So there's a guideline. The guideline proposes that any production sector, not only the brick-making one, can have this process of articulation in air quality compliance by implementing 5 steps. The first one is recognition of particularities of the sector and surroundings. So you need to characterize in function environmental authorities and the people, the communities around a certain territory know how sectors work. Companies need to know their affectations, what they are causing against the others during their productive, uncontrolled processes. This leads to generate the first alarms. What are the stakeholders that are most affected? The second step is when we recognize that communities are not homogeneous. Communities have certain differentiated stakeholders. And we need to know them, characterize them in order to have differentiated interventions. In that sense, we need to generate participations according to the needs that could be managed through institutionality to generate programs or technical assistance and implementation of projects, proposals of implementation of standards, surveillance, controls, with technology, with support, with building skills and capacities from the public policy, the academy, and the companies or entrepreneurs themselves. In the fourth step, there are consensus and regulatory and technical solutions. What does it mean? In this instance, we need to procure instances already created by the law, by the Ministry of Environment, for example, these mesas sectoriales or discussion groups, where we can sit together, all of stakeholders, to have alternatives, to set a roadmap that we can implement. So in step 5, within the instruments of territorial planning, we could have instruments, for example, territorial development plans, organization plans, competitive plans, basin management plans, plans that allow us to include public resources, capacities, and thinking in long term. So this could come in a productive reality, and we can have sustainable production that is effective in compliance of the goals and international agreements. So my kind invitation is on the table. We need to continue working in these sessions of transference. And today, let's say we're going to have the next topic, that is management of emissions. I leave you with Fabio Salgado. Thank you very much. We see in next session. Thank you.
Good morning to you all attendants that are here today, Tuesday, 13 October, in Knowledge Transference with our people of EasyMod. We want to thank for your presence in the last session when we talk about the method and the public policies implemented in Colombia. Today, we want to tell you a little bit more about the experiences on measurements, results, and compare the experiences we've had with equipments that were provided by the Cleaner Coalition. We want to identify black carbon measurements that have a positive impact in the brick-making sector. We're going to introduce results and experiences in black carbon measurement made in Colombia. This presentation is divided into 3. Initially, I'm going to tell you about the context of measurement, how we started in Colombia, the benefits of these measurements for the brick sector and entrepreneurs. Next, Engineer Pergini Ruiz, expert in measurement and emission factors, she's going to tell you about the results obtained, methodologies, and the inventory of the brick sector we have obtained in Colombia. And finally, Engineer David Beltran, expert in the LEAP software sector and public health, he's going to give us a landscape on how these measurements have been behaving in Colombia and what we expect socially, environmentally. To start with the presentation, let me tell you, this whole process of measurement, determination, and identification of emission factors started in 2013 through public policies and the regulations existing in Colombia in regard to measurement protocols, standards. Colombia has a standard that sets certain admissible, fixed and mobile sources of black carbon. That was the driver that led the brick sector to be measured, to generate information in measurement. And that's why Colombia already had, entrepreneurs had an infrastructure and technical knowledge prior to allow to make these measurements. In 2014, 2015, we started the inventory of black carbon measurements through an exchange of knowledge in which we articulated the academy, entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs, labs of Colombia, where with all technical capacities and abilities, we took the baseline, made an inventory, and we identified what technological models were, what was the most representative emission factors, kilns, industries, and what is the amount of black carbon issued by the brick sector. In 2016, 2018, we had knowledge transference with Illinois University. We had the support of Swiss Contact, Illinois University, CHEM, Clean Air Coalition, EasyMod. So we started measurements and knowledge transference with a specialized team to measure black carbon, PM2.5 particulate knowledge. This whole protocol was validated internationally. This was implemented also satisfactorily in Colombia. As main results, we identified in the first stage of measurements 141 measurements, 4 emission factors. We measured in 10 provinces of Colombia more than 600 monitoring hours. This process and method was a reference and pioneer. We transferred the method to Peru, where we contact the people of Swiss Contact and the people working in Peru. What was the method we applied? Sampling, comparison between samples, EPA methodology, and the RAT-NOS2 equipment. This allowed us to transfer knowledge to other allies countries that have an emerging brick-making sector. In that, the last stage, 2018-2020, we finished black carbon measurements. We identified 7 factors of emission, obtained several benefits and co-benefits, and certain measures of models and practices of entrepreneurs to reduce black carbon in use of biomass, natural gas use, mixing fuels, energetic efficiency in a kiln. All this process, all this exercise validated was already taken to the entrepreneurs and the academy that have given us their support and their help. How we achieved to work with entrepreneurs in Colombia, since we have a standard on particulate materials, it is ruling already the entrepreneurs. It was a challenge and an opportunity. It was satisfactory because entrepreneurs wanted to be receptive to measure their carbon emission. They even invited us to their plants in order to make those measurements. It is important to mention that the benefits of this is how much brick-making sector is contributing in climate, health, and the improvements of the brick sector around these years, and all these good practices from the entrepreneurs that have been generated. As a result, we've generated a portfolio of measurements of black carbon reduction. We have used several experiences, measurements, results already validated in several manners, in several scenarios, in order to have traceability of these results and be able to define what are the low-cost measures to implement in the brick sector in order to reduce the greenhouse effect and the black carbon effect. As a recommendation in general, we identified that there should be a combustion process control. The entrepreneurs have a cooking curve. There's a temperature curve. They already know what is the temperature when they have to inject more fuel or less fuel. The quality of fuel actually is really a strength within the measurements we identified and strengthened, because since measurements are a balance of mass that they do punctually in the kiln, where we analyzed everything entering the going into the kiln and what is the output of the kiln, what are the best fuels compared to other fuels in other regions of Colombia that are being sold to brick entrepreneurs. We identified what are the processes, what is the best fuel, and what are the fuels our entrepreneurs are buying for the productive process. So it is really important to validate this type of fuel, since this is the first energetic element we use in the brick sector. In good operational practices, we already identified control of heat leaks to identify unnecessary leaks, so the cooking is much more efficient within the productive process. All this technical work and measurements have allowed us to articulate with universities, labs, entrepreneurs. They have invited us, and we have generated certain workshops, expert people in short life pollutants. During these 7 years of work, they have feedbacked us in results, their viewpoints, sampling methods, equipments. So we also articulated several undergraduate, graduate works in the universities with this brick sector. It has been an articulated work, and we closed the barrier, the gap between the academia and the entrepreneurs. We have a match now. So the technical processes generated in the universities could be applicable satisfactorily in the entrepreneur and industrial sectors of Colombia. It is important to mention that all these practices and processes have a positive impact in the environment, and they have invited us also. We have mapped and identified that entrepreneurs have done certain things autonomously, and we have determined in the topic of use of biomass, Colombia, since we don't have several regions where we have significant amounts of this fuel, we have encountered we identify the mixing of biomass and coal that obtain positive results for environment and public health. And lastly, changing, overhauling kilns is also reducing black carbon in 56%, and it also reduces CO2. Let me tell you that our initiative has been pioneer in scopes and focus approaching sustainable development. We have an impact positively in the brick sector. One, climate change in reducing short-life pollutants, and second, public health, where we have identified and mapped if people and communities around a kiln or a brick making facility, if they are affected by PM, particulate material PM P2.5. Another impact we have is energetic efficiency, contribution to energetic efficiency that could be implemented in low cost in the brick sector, and the measures they have to have a better landscape on what measures or what if energetic efficiency could be implemented in those companies. Lastly, all the technical measures, all the technical information is reflected in public policies documents, in technical documents that are available freely, where they consolidate all information, because all this technical analysis needs public policies, where all this management, all this knowledge is focused for the main stakeholders, entrepreneurs, environmental authorities, and Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development. Next, we're going to have Mrs. Virginie Rees, engineer. She's going to tell us about the inventory we have in the brick sector, emission factors obtained in the processes of measurement of black carbon in Colombia. Thank you, Fabio, for your kind invitation. Greetings to all attendants. Today, I'm going to present the results of the black carbon measurements that we developed in the Entrepreneurial Environmental Corporation, CAEM, during 2016-2019. To start the measurements, we took the baseline. It was a work previously developed in 2015, corresponded to the brick inventory. Out of that inventory, what we did was determining what areas of Colombia, what provinces of Colombia we have. In this inventory, what we did was to count the number of brick companies, brick-making companies, count the kilns in each of those provinces, and define the ton per month production. These are the data we see in this chart. In this chart, we found certain particularities because out of provinces that have a higher representativity in brick making, for example, province Boyacá in Colombia, happens to be not as representative in production. So we noticed a very marked difference in technologies applied for brick making. In our inventory, we wanted to answer three questions. Basically, technology applied to make clay or brick products, fuels, and dosage that we use in Colombia. Results we have obtained in our inventory were as follows. Basically, technologies we found predominantly the following: Pampa kiln, dormant fire, beehive, vault, continuous chamber, Hoffman type, rolls, tunnel, wagon, and zigzag kiln. Fuels used, we noticed that the most widely used fuel is coal. Nevertheless, there are many kilns recently using natural gas, biomass, and in certain cases, certain mixes between biomass, coal, or coal, natural gas. Dosage systems, we have mainly manual dosification, manual dosage that is related to non-continuous kilns or aircraft kilns. In other type of kilns, we find carbojet and automated fuel dosification systems. They are semi-automated or continuous automatic distribution of fuel. After having how many companies we have, how many brick companies we have, and what is the amount fuel consumed, what is the amount of bricks or clay products produced, then we defined the classification of biomass, for example. Maybe this is a fuel we haven't studied deeply in Colombia. We don't talk about general biomass. There are several types. For example, coffee, biomass. In black carbon measurement, we found other type of materials, sawdust, and others, where we have many agricultural production, much agricultural production. South of Colombia, Huila, Cauca, Valle del Cauca, we found this type of fuel. Here, we have an open door to continue studying what are the possible impacts we have in the use of biomasses in terms of black carbon emissions. What we found in energy production. We found, as I mentioned before, coal is the biggest widely used fuel. In Colombia, we have two sources of coal. We talk about Boyacá mining process and Antioquia mining, coal mining. Further, we're going to see how the origin of the coal is important. Because depending on the coal quality, we see the emissions in a process. Within the same study, we not only focused in reviewing what are the percentages of use of fuels, but also the type of kiln. In the chart to the right, we found that aircraft kilns have a bigger representativity compared to semi-continuous or automated mechanic kilns. In the lower right part chart, mechanized kilns, they are fewer in Colombia, are the ones having the biggest production of bricks in Colombia. So there's a disparity. The idea is, with all the public policies and the brick table group, since we managed in the comparison, we invite brick producers having very aircraft or semi-continuous kilns. We need to migrate to other technologies, mechanized, efficient, automated technologies that consume less fuels or guarantee better the use of fuel and generate more brick production. To understand better the dynamics of our sector, it is important to know the quality of fuel. Fuel quality is shown in these two photos. On the left, biomass, and on the right, coal. We took 50 samples. Out of those 50 samples, the ones in green correspond to biomass, and the blue ones correspond to several types of coal, and the two bars in gray are mixed coal, natural gas, or coal biomass. In the first analysis, we wanted to know what is the percentage of sulfur. Why sulfur? Because if the biomass, our fuel contains sulfur, at the moment of burning, oxidation, this elemental sulfur turns into sulfur dioxide. This is critical component here in Colombia. This is one of the greenhouse gases that we could measure with the rat nose equipment. The ideal is that our fuels have just a very low percentage of sulfur. Nevertheless, there are some coals, for example, sample 17, 30, 42, that surpass the desired percentage. For sure, the chimneys they have by using these type of fuels, they're going to have emission problems, non-complying emissions to the standard. Same we wanted to do in the percentage of ashes. The ideal in a fuel is having the lowest percentage of ashes. So all the fuel that you use is energetically used. What does it mean? Ashes is an element within a fuel. It doesn't have any heat power. What it makes is generate volume, but I'm not going to use it energetically speaking. So we have our biomass. They are diverse because, I repeat, sugar cane, coffee, wood. We have several biomasses. In coals, we have big differences. Look, most of them have lower ash percentage, but there are certain samples, sample 19, 33, 39, they have high percentages of ashes. What does it mean? Those entrepreneurs are investing in cheap fuels. These fuels don't represent big winnings in energetic use. So to achieve the same cooking of clay, you're gonna use more fuel, more coal in this case. Therefore, you're gonna generate more particulate material and emissions or black carbon emissions in your chimney. Moisture is also important in sample analysis. The bigger the moisture, it means I'm gonna consume more fuel in order to release the steam. The ideal is that moisture percentage is lower than 3%. In this case, all biomasses, because of their nature, they have a moisture content very high. For coals, we expected this didn't happen, but look, we have several samples where that coal had a lot of moisture. Two things could happen here. The coal being sold in Colombia doesn't fulfill the quality standards we need in the brick sector or clay products, or second, the way the entrepreneur is managing storage or using the coal is not right. Having so high moisture, it means that for the same production, clay products or brick products, I'm going to use more fuel, more coal. Therefore, I'm going to have more pollutant emissions. Finally, in our analysis, we focused in heat power of our samples. Biomass, of course, has a lower heat power compared to coals or mixings. In coal, most of those samples fulfill the range, the limit, which is 650 kilocalories per gram of fuel. However, we have certain samples which heat power did not reach the 600 minimum. speaking sample 19, 34, 33, 35. So all those samples had the commonality that, yes, it is coal. Yes, we use it in the brick sector, but it is not yielding the energy necessary for that type of situations. We need to review with our suppliers what are the possibilities of optimizing the conditions of our fuels. Otherwise, we need to change suppliers. In certain situations, some of our providers decided to work in pilot programs, samples 49 and 50. These two projects are located in province Antioquia of Colombia, where we have the worst coal quality. They noticed with all these trials that their coal did not respond to the needs of sulfur, moisture, heat power. What they decided to do is researching trial and error on how to use the kiln in mixing fuel. So in heat power, this mixing natural gas, coal, biomass coal, achieve the minimum heat power we need. So part of the exercises we've done is precisely to find a problem and see what are the possible achievable solutions. If I cannot migrate to a new fuel, I can see the possibilities of working with a mixing. After having all these analysis of fuels in Colombia, we wanted to take the task now to measure with the rat nose equipment. This Colombian equipment is version 2. With that, we can measure PM 2.5 particulate material. We analyzed black carbon, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide. Those are the materials we measure through this rat nose equipment. We already know what is an emission factor. I'm going to mention. Emission factor is a number that is going to allow me to use in order to develop emission inventories by knowing production factors. What are the production factors we need? Eventually, we know the amount of production per month, per day, per year, that depends on the production sector, or we know the fuel consumption, the heat power we need in our kiln, or third, we need the amount of power or energy or fuel we're going to use, natural gas, coal, or mixings. To start our measurements, we took the baseline of the brick sector performed or carried on in 2015. For this inventory, we took into account provinces of Colombia, as presented here, 16 in Colombia. And look, they all are in the Andean sector of Colombia, where we found clays. They all are located there, but Atlántico province. This is not an Andean sector. Out of these provinces, we couldn't measure directly with all the number of kilns determined in the inventory. It was out of budget. What we did then was, in those provinces, what were the more representative in Colombia, the most representative in production or in terms of technologies. Out of the technologies that we already identified before, out of these technologies, we try to find or make measurements in all those possible kilns. And it was necessary to replicate in several heights or several areas of Colombia. Keeping in mind these technologies and the geographic distribution of what we found in our inventory, we started to do our measures. In Antioquia province, we measured 2 tunnel kilns, 1 wagon, and fuels we found were biomass, natural gas, and mixings. 1 mix, natural gas and coal. In Boyacá province, which is one of the most representative brick producer, because the amount of chimneys we have in Boyacá is significant compared to other provinces. We took measurements on 1 hive and 1 chambers. Since in Boyacá there's a coal mine, most of them use coal. In Caldas province, this is a province that has a lot of agricultural tradition, so they prefer to use biomass. Nevertheless, for this exercise that we carried on with the corporation, we measured a tunnel kiln working with coal. In Cauca province, in the south of Colombia, it is also an agricultural province. The kiln we measured is a zigzag kiln, one of the most continuous, most modern, technified technologies we have in Colombia. They use coal. It doesn't mean in Cauca it is the only technology or the only fuel that they use. For sure, other aircraft technologies present in Cauca that are significant, they prefer to use biomass. In Cundinamarca province, this is the second highly brick producer in terms of number of kilns and number of production and kilns. We measured 2 Hoffmans, 2 zigzags, 2 tunnels, and 1 beehive. They are the continuous kilns, and these continuous kilns, we took beehive, dormant fire, and chambers. So in the same province, we found 11 samples of technologies. In this case, Cundinamarca, close to Boyacá, they prefer to use coal. It doesn't mean that's the only thing they use. There are other fuels, for example, biomass. There's one kiln that was found using wood and mixings. So coal is brought from Boyacá. It is good characteristic coal. In Huila province, likewise Quindío or Cauca province or Caldas, it is also an agricultural province, so they work a lot with biomass. In this case, we studied a pampa kiln. In north of Santander, which is in the northern part of Colombia, border with Venezuela, we worked with 4 beehive kilns. These 4 worked with coal. North of Santander is representative, likewise Boyacá and Cundinamarca, not precisely of the number of kilns or the amount of production, but it is a very typical traditional clay product. It is very particular compared to the other bricks or other clay products they found. They prefer beehive technology because with this technology they finish the brick with a differentiation. They achieve colors, they achieve different particularities. We said that Huila is an agricultural province. Therefore, most of the kilns present there, they use biomass. Now we pass to another province that is not agricultural. Nevertheless, is one of the most representative provinces in brick production. It's north of Santander. North of Santander, we measured 4 beehive kilns. They all use coal. Why north of Santander has this predilection for beehive kilns? They have specialized. They have focused in this type of kiln because these beehive kiln guarantee customized products. It is exclusive. So this has yielded results for them. They use several color clays, several textures that are highly appreciated for certain specific architectural procedures. It is not mass sales, not brick sales, massive brick sales. This is customized products. Since this is particular, they are very desirable products. This is the biggest export in bricks north of Santander province, but the region itself has the advantage because they have excellent quality of clays. So most of brick producers in that area take the chance of having a beehive kiln. They have made certain modifications between one another. in feeding fuels, the coupling, the heat distribution inside the kiln. That sets a personal stamp. But in general, the north of Santander province has a certain particularity in quality that is higher compared to other provinces. Santander province is the next lower part of province of north of Santander. We measured a Hoffman kiln using coal. That small province, Caldas, we measured 2 Pampa kilns. It is agricultural province, so we have 2 measures of biomass. And finally, Valle del Cauca province. Here, this is one of the provinces that is mostly agricultural, so they prefer to use biomass. Nevertheless, those kilns that initially were aircraft migrated to new technologies. They have new technologies, Hoffman and tunnel kilns. They are continuous or semi-continuous procedures. And these kilns guarantee better advantage of fuel and more mass production. In this case, we analyzed biomass and 2 mixes. These 2 mixes are 2 biomasses in several proportions. Out of that result, those analyses made between 2016 and 2019, we started collecting other information and we classified this data in 4 parts. Basically, these 4 columns refer to fuel only. So the first chart we have here, we have the emission factors obtained per fuel for kilns using mineral coal or bituminous coal. As you notice, for each of the kilns, for each technology, tunnel, Hoffman, zigzag, chambers, dormant fire, and beehive, we determined 3 emission factors. The first one is based in the fuel itself. The emission factor is based in the amount of fuel fed into the kiln. That's the first band of the chart. The intermediate band is power consumption. We wanted to have a baseline precisely on fuels. And finally, we have emission factors based on production. So the number of bricks or the amount of cooked clay is presented in this case. Since we had the rat nose equipment, this equipment allowed us to measure carbon monoxide and sulfur dioxide in PM 2.5 particulate material. Through that lab analysis, we also had black carbon factor, black carbon emission factor. This is the chart of those technologies using coal in Colombia. Next is the same chart but using tunnel kiln, same distribution, factors based in fuel, energy, and combustion. In this case, natural gas we found or we measured one of those technologies. This is tunnel kiln. For next chart, we have the mixings, natural gas coal, biomass coal. We have emission factors based on energy production and fuel. We have 2 technologies, tunnel and Hoffman here. And finally, we present emission factors for kilns that work only with biomass. In this case, we found 3 technologies, Hoffman, Wagon, and Pampa. In this case, we saw the potential of reviewing a little bit more the use of biomass in Colombia, since we took only 2 kilns as work because of lack of schedule, budget, whatever. We want to do a bigger, deep study for biomass. This chart could be separated. I prefer not only speak in biomass terms, but only use of sugarcane, rice, coffee, and we have several elements in Colombia for biomass. There are many areas of Colombia where we have residues of agriculture that could be taken advantage of as a fuel. Out of the brick-making sector, this exercise is applied in the clay sector, determining emission factors for several materials. This is an exercise that could be replicable in other sectors, for example, textiles or general manufacturing, or sectors where we use several fuel types. It doesn't mean it matters the sector, not only bricks. Services also are included. This exercise would be interesting to repeat it and extrapolate to other sectors to identify what are the energy consumptions and what are the emissions of those equipments. I'm going to pass the floor to David on technologies and implementations we've done. Thank you for your kind invitation to this socialization event. The idea of this presentation is to see what are the eco-benefits and benefits obtained and assessed with the information collected from the brick sector. This part is utmost important because it depends on the availability of information and how the brick maker can trust on this information presented to us as information analysts in order to make decisions. We're going to see the benefits and eco-benefits in environment, social, and economic terms. For this, we have a case study, the specific sector in Colombia that is called the Mochuelo Mining Park. The Mochuelo Mining Park is located in the southern part of Bogota, the capital of Colombia. In that sense, we found that this sector has certain special features. It is an area that has a specific work for manufacturing clay products, in this case, brick makers. And additionally, we have other industries that has mining, for example, asphalt. And in the southern part of Bogota, there are certain conditions where there could be emissions for the use of soil for a sanitary filling. This is complex in this area. So what would be the contribution of particle emission? To assess the possible benefits and eco-benefits of the implementation of best practices in the brick-making sector, we took as a reference the mining park Mochuelos. This case study allowed us to assess advantages in environment, social, and economic in implementing best practices based on information supplied, in this case, by the brick makers of that region of Colombia. Where is Mochuelo Mining Park? It is located in the southern part of Bogota, the capital of Colombia. Now, this is an interesting area to assess the effects of implementation of best practices in the brick sector. It is very difficult territory. Why? Because there are not only brick-making companies, there are also other mining companies to generate asphalts, to make asphalts. In the south of Mochuelo Park, there's the sanitary filling that is called Doña Juana that collects all of the residues from Bogota City. So, in that idea, this allows us to determine what could be the benefits or advantages in external emissions in the productive area. Moreover, we found that there's good meteorological weather information in details to analyze dispersion, where and how pollutants go associated to the brick-making sector. Why is it important? Well, inside the sector, inside the area of the mining park, there are other populational groups that could be sensitive to the exposure of pollutants associated to black carbon, the use of fossil fuels. In this case, for example, the Mochuelo Bajo village. For this, we based in a life cycle analysis of a product, in this case, bricks or blocks, in order to assess where could be generation of combustion contributing to emission of black carbon. On that area, we found that there could be priority on the effects of emissions in cooking. When cooking the bricks, the kiln, in analyzing the kiln, we could use the emission factors developed during measurements in order to determine what is the contribution of this point in particle emission into environment. In that sense, keeping in mind emission factors, we find two possible scenarios to improve. The first scenario is to improve the possibilities of combustion in a kiln. In the second scenario, we have the possibility of improving not only the combustion, but also reducing the possible reprocessing associated to the productive process in the brick-making company. Keeping in mind this, we found that if we apply emission factors in terms of improving fuel consumption and improving productive capabilities of a plant, we have a reduction of 18% approximately, improving just the fuel usage, fuel capacity, and combustion capacity. We have a 16% reduction in improving the using the raw materials turned into clay products or bricks. Moreover, in terms of pollutant emission, we have improvements of 18%, 19% of exposure yearly in PM2.5 particles and sulfur dioxide, and also improvements, reduction of 23% in exposure or amount of particulate material, sulfur dioxide and PM2.5 reaching receivers if we improve the productive capabilities in a brick-making plant. From the visual point, this is the visual approach of the dispersion of the pollutants, pollutant dispersion in several scenarios. PM2.5 was reduced significantly. The exposed area to concentrations that are high above the levels suggested by the WHO. In the case of sulfur dioxide, that we know is highly associated to the consumption of coal with a high content of moisture or sulfur, there's a significant reduction that tells us it has a benefit by the implementation of best practices in terms of fuel consumption, power consumption, production, and combustion. In environmental effects that we found rapidly, there's a reduction in the use of fuels and less emission of pollutants into the atmosphere, reduction of collateral effects on possible ecosystem services around the productive plant, keeping in mind the process life cycle. This, in terms of money, economically, this is reflected in a reduction possibility of $190,000 per intervened hectare, keeping in mind the cost of intervention in landscaping terms or other ecosystem services. In economic terms, by improving the efficiency in using power efficiency, combustion efficiency, using the coal, approximately, if taking the baseline, the cost of a ton of coal, $50, we could save $1890 savings. Additional savings are $380 per month by reducing 20% reprocessing in the processes of the brick-making company. Additionally, in terms of what we want to develop socially, in regard to these measures, we have less exposure by people that are close to the brick-making plant. This is social infrastructure that, according to the information of Colombia, 17% have the risk of getting diseased or die on diseases coming from the air. In economic terms, for the health system, this is around 200 and 3,900 USD per person, per patient in this case, keeping in mind the possible comorbidities or risk factors in the future for that person. It means that in the end, developing certain best practices in the brick-making sector, in the brick industry, it has very interesting benefits. As for the brick, the entrepreneur, the maker, as for the government that has to give attention to the external problems of this production upon the population. Next, we're going to pass to easy mode to find commonalities in the knowledge transference in terms of results learned, lessons, barriers, and challenges we found through the measurement process. We're going to have the person of easy mode who has the floor now. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Greetings from Nepal. I am Sagar Adhikari, working at easy mode as Air Pollution Emissions Research Associate. Today, I am going to present about the brachial emissions measurement techniques using rat nose and would like to share some results from the measurements also. First of all, I would like to share some ideas and some about the emissions from the brick kiln in the southeastern region or in our context. You know, brick kilns are one of the major sources of air pollution in southeastern regions in different countries such as India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. But you know, the studies of these emissions are very limited. The characterizations of the emissions are also limited in this region. This might be due to the lesser, unavailability of the suitable instrument for the measurement also, or the sectors are very unorganized, and it might be due to the hard to sample the high concentrated plume, heated plume from the chimney of the brick kilns also. So these are the general background context of our reasons to overcome this issue. We are using rat nose for the brick kiln emissions measurement. Rat nose is actually a portable sampling equipment. It is designed and fabricated by the University of Illinois and the Mountaineer Engineering Company, USA. The first generation rat nose development was actually supported by CCSE, which was tested in Nepal and India at first. And now, the various generations, version 1, version 2, and other generations are being used to measure the particulate and the gaseous pollutant from the different air pollution sources, primarily from the brick kilns, and we are also using the rat nose for the diesel vehicle emissions measurement, irrigation pumps measurement, and other source emissions measurement also. You can see the picture of the rat nose in this slide also, and this is the general flow diagram, which is showing in the slide. What actually it measures is the carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, primary gas pollutant with the sulfur dioxide also, and it also measures PM 2.5 and black carbon at 1 Hertz resolution. So why the rat nose is the special? I can say some special features of the rat nose. The rat nose can be used to measure the plume sample as well as the diffusive smoke sample. For the plume sample measurements, it is equipped with a pitot tube, which allow us to measure the velocity of the plume, and which is actually adopted for the isokinetic sampling techniques. And for the diffusive gas sampling method, we can simply use the sampling probe. You can see the use of rat nose in the plume, in the irrigation pump emission. You can see that clamp clean emissions and diesel vehicle emissions. We are using the various source emissions I've already noted down earlier. The special feature of this system is the dilution system. The rat nose is dilution system. which is like applicable for highly concentrated heated sample. For the quality control and quality assurance of rat nose, we are doing the annual factor calibration. We also compare the gaseous data with the data obtained from other high sensitive equipment such as liquor and other NDIR based carbon monoxide sensors, and we also like validate the sensors by checking the cal gas at the regular interval of time and before every field activities. So in this southeastern region, the rat nose is being used in the different countries like Nepal, India, Pakistan. Till now, I think we have measured more than 40 break-ins, and in most of the countries, such as in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, they are very much interested to have at least one equipment for the emissions measurement. And till now, we mostly measure FCBTK types, such as traditional straight line kilns and zigzag kilns, clamp kilns, and it to measures the tunnel and Hoffman kilns and other brick making technologies also. You can see in the picture, like we have been focusing on the brick for FCBTK, natural draft, forced draft zigzag, and clamp kiln also. So after the measurement, what we are doing for the data is we are estimating the emission factors for the pollutant like PM, BC, and other pollutant that been measured through the rat nose. We are adopting actually carbon mass balance method. The carbon mass balance method is like the simple stoichiometric calculation based method, which actually do the emission factor calculation based on the carbon balance from the smoke sample and the fuel carbon content. That's why we had to measure carbon containing pollutants such as carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide along with black carbon, and we have also had to measure the fuel carbon content during the measurement also. So after that, we simply apply the simple stoichiometric calculation formula for the computation of carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide emission factor. And based on emission factor of the carbon monoxide, we can actually calculate the emission factor of the black carbon and PM. The general equation is shown here in the presentation. It is widely accepted in the scientific community, and since early 1990s, and you can find many publications based on this method also. There are various benefits using this method because it is a widely scientific accepted method. We don't need to capture all exhaust sample, and even a short sampling period can be a good representative of the total emission, and the emission factor of the other pollutant can be measured and estimated based on the carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide emissions. And we don't need to have a detail of the total fuel consumptions during the measurement period also. But there are some limitations for this method, very few, such as we need to accurate and concurrent measure of carbon containing rich species such as carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, which we are measuring through the rat nose, and we need the parallel temperature and pressure measurement along with the other real-time measurements of the other pollutant also. So now in the result section, I can share you the result from our Berkeley emissions measurement. You can see in the presentation that I'm sharing the real-time emission factor that was obtained from one of the brick kilns measured in Nepal. You can see the emission factor of various pollutants such as gaseous pollutant, CO, CO2, and SO2. And you can also see the real-time variations of the PM and black carbon here in the graph. The regular peak observed in the red line, that is belongs to the PM 2.5 emission. You can see the regular peak is represents the feeding cycle, right? During the feeding period, the pollutant peak becoming high, and during non-feeding period, the pollutant is being decreased. You can see the variations, how accurate is the measurement through the red nose. And based on the red nose measurement and the Brechtel emissions analysis, we have already published one paper. I am sharing the emission factor table, and we can see we are comparing two different kind of technology. One is the traditional one, FCBTK, fixed chimney Boltzmann kiln, and another one is the Industraft zigzag kiln, which are now ECMOD is promoting in the country. And we can see the variations in the emission factor of these two technologies. In an average, the zigzag kilns are like emitting approximately 40% less PM2.5 than the FCBTK, and 55% less black carbon than the FCBTK. So we can compare the technology, for the better analysis. So there are also some other publications based on the rat nose measurement. We have already published about the break-in that I have recently mentioned earlier, and we have also published one article based on the diesel irrigation pump, and another one is the diesel vehicle emissions analysis. I can share you the link if you need. Here are the details of the paper that I presented. Thank you.
Prepare different topics that are for the interest of the sector, and we hope that you give us your ideas with Asia, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. So Fabio, tell us one of the first conclusions of this
Bueno,
process.
Luisa,
Well, Luisa,
principalmente, y algo que hemos rescatado
mainly,
mucho,
and
es esa
something that
transferencia
we
de conocimiento
received
que
is
se ha
the
dado
transfer of
en
knowledge
ambos
that
países.
we
Es un
have
poco
given
también
that has
lo que
taken place
comentabas,
in
doctor
both
Zagar,
countries. Dr.
en el
Zagar
uso del equipo de
told
medición, el
us about
RADNOS
that in
2,
the
el cual se ha
Renault
usado
Renault
en
2
ambos países
emissions that have
para
been
medición
used
de
in
hornos
two
muy similares con
countries and
combustibles que
furnaces
también
that
son
are very
de
similar
propiedades
with
iguales.
fuel that
Entonces,
that has
desde
the
rescatar
same
que se han aprendido lecciones, se tienen lecciones aprendidas
characteristics,
de
and we
parte de
have
ambos
a
países, y
lot
eso ha
of
ayudado a que
lessons
el
learned from
desarrollo
both
de este
countries and
modelo
the development
tecnológico
of
se haya
this
mejorado
model, this
mucho más
technological
para
model,
los
improved
siguientes
better for the
modelos y
next
equipos de
models
medición que se han
and
desarrollado por parte de la
measurement
coalición.
equipment that were
También,
developed by the
pues es un
coalition.
esfuerzo a
So
nivel
it is an
mundial y es un
effort
esfuerzo que hace la
that is
coalición
worldwide,
en el desarrollo de
and it is an
un
effort
protocolo de
to
medición ya
develop
validado
a
y estandarizado y que
measurement
ha tenido la
protocol
oportunidad de ser
standardized that has been
medido en campo
measured
y
in the
puesto a
field
prueba en ambos
and
países.
tested in
Entonces creo que
both
algo que es
countries.
que
So
hay
I
mucho que
think
rescatar
it's
por ese
a
tema.
lot of things that we can say
Y bueno,
about this
también son
topic,
lecciones aprendidas de que hay
and
que seguir
lessons learned that
midiendo,
we have
de que los
continued
empresarios
measurement,
están
and the
muy dados a
entrepreneurs
hacer estas mediciones,
want to
que
do these
les
measurements,
interesa un poco
and they are
también saber
interested
cuánto
to
están
know
emitiendo y mejorar su
how
proceso
are the
productivo.
emissions and to
Uno de
improve
los
the productive
principales
process.
aportes
One
de
of the
este
main
proceso de medición en nuestro país
measurement of this
específicamente
process
es
of
la validación del
measurement is
proceso a
validation
través
of the
del uso de
process through
biomasa.
the use of biomass.
Evidentemente contábamos
And
con
of
más
course,
datos
we had
en el
more
uso
data
y el
in the use
aprovechamiento
and
del carbón,
improvement of
pero
the
la biomasa se
carbon use,
constituye en
but the
una
biomass
oportunidad
is an
que, como en este
opportunity
caso, debe
that
ser
in this
validada y
case
debe
should
ser
be
considerada muy
validated and
especialmente
considered
para tomar
especially
decisiones de
to make
política pública.
decisions
Cuéntenos,
according to
Fabio,
the
¿dónde
public
medimos con
policy.
biomasa?
So where
Bueno, esta es una
where
pregunta
we
muy buena
measure that
porque
with
veo que en el
biomass. That
chat
is
nos
a
han
great
preguntado mucho
question in
sobre
the
el
chat.
tema del uso de la
We have
biomasa.
received a lot of questions about the
Entonces,
use of
bueno,
biomass.
contarles un poco para las personas que nos acompañan de otros países cómo es el
Tell us
contexto
what
en
is
el
the
uso de la
context of
biomasa
the
en
biomass
nuestro país.
in our country.
Principalmente la biomasa se
Mainly
usa
the biomass
en
is
la
used
zona
in
cafetera, lo
the
que es
coffee
Quindío,
zone,
Caldas y Valle
Quindío,
del Cauca, donde hay
Candas,
una mayor
and Valle
cantidad y
del Cauca,
disponibilidad de
where
este
there is a
combustible,
lot of
entonces lo hace mucho
this
más accesible para
fuel
los
that is
empresarios.
more accessible for entrepreneurs.
En este sentido, hemos
In
medido
this
hornos que
regard,
usan
we have
biomasa
measured
en
furnaces that
Quindío,
use
en el
biomass,
Huila,
Quindío,
en
Huila,
Cundinamarca, una mezcla de
Cundinamarca,
carbón con
mix
acerrín,
of carbon
y
with
también el
sawdust,
cafetero,
and
y
also
bueno, son como las regiones
in
donde
the
mayor
coffee axis,
disponibilidad de
and
este
those
combustible
are the
hay,
regions
con
where
unos buenos
we
resultados
can
que
work with
también,
this fuel,
leyendo un poco el
and
chat,
with good results
se han
that
identificado en
have
Asia,
been
en el cual,
identified in
aunque las
Asia,
emisiones de dióxido de carbono,
also
de
in the
carbono negro
black
disminuyen con
carbon
el uso de la
emissions
biomasa,
are
sí
less
se ha
with the use of
identificado un poco
biomass.
más que se
We
aumenta
identified that,
la emisión de
that
material
the
particulado.
particular
Esto
matter
posiblemente a que
increases mainly because
no se queme completamente
it
la
cannot be
partícula de biomasa,
the
entonces
biomass
de pronto eso
particle
puede
is not
generar a que
burned, but
se
it can
haya mayor
generate that
cantidad de
there
material
should be
particulado, por lo cual
more particulate
hay que
material.
seguir de pronto
So we
investigando
have
como
to
en el uso de la
investigate a little bit
biomasa,
more
qué mejores
the
prácticas se
use of
podrían
biomass,
implementar, de pronto el
what
tema de
which
pellets, de pronto ya un tema
practices,
más
maybe
de
pellets that could be
mejor
used,
dosificación para este
and
combustible.
dosage that can be used with this fuel. And we can take the advantage to for the secretaries of the Valle del Cauca, Caldas, Quindío, and our entrepreneurs that taking part of this in the use of biomass. So Fabio, next we're going to present our consultant, David Beltran, which is with the first conclusions with the transfer process. And again, we are waiting for your questions on the chat, any question, suggestion, and comment. We will be ready to answer and to give you an answer.
Hola. ¿Me escuchan bien? Bueno,
Te escuchamos.
dentro... sí, ok, gracias.
So go ahead, David, please.
Ok, digamos que una de las cosas más importantes que se pueden sacar de esta experiencia es que
One of the
tener
best experience that we
información de
can take
primera
from
mano
this
por
experience is
parte de
having
los
information
industriales
from the
es
first hand from
crucial
the
para
industry.
determinar
It's crucial
acciones de
to
mejora
determine improvement
en el sector
actions
productivo.
in the productive sector.
Esto no
So
solamente es
this
información
is
de
not
cuánto
only information
producen
on
o
how
cuánto
they produce or
consumen
how
de
they consume,
combustible.
but
También es,
regarding
por
fuel,
ejemplo,
it's also the
información
organization of
organizacional.
the
Cómo es
is
que
information of the
trabajan, cuál
organization.
es su
How do they
cultura
work? What is their
de trabajo, cuáles son
work
sus
culture? What are
condiciones
their
interiorizadas
conditions
de cómo hacer las
on how
cosas
to
de
make
una mejor
things
manera.
in a better way?
Y para eso
And
también
that way,
las mediciones nos han
the
dado la
measurements
posibilidad
given
de
us
mirar
the
qué
possibility
qué se
to
puede
see
considerar como una mejor
what can be
práctica.
considered as a best
Entonces, en ese
practice.
orden de ideas,
And
por
regarding
eso
that,
considero que es muy clave
I think it's key
fortalecer los
to
estándares de
strengthen
medición,
the
y
standards
esto se
of
construye
measurement,
solamente a través de la
and that
investigación
can
y
be
desarrollo.
built only
Y esta
through
experiencia
research
que
and
hemos
development.
desarrollado
That
con
experience
la coalición ha permitido
coalition,
desarrollar esa
and that
investigación y
it
desarrollo.
has allowed us to work with
Por otro
this
lado, tenemos que el
research and
desarrollo de
development.
espacios de
Also,
confianza, como por ejemplo el caso de las mesas
trust
ladrilleras,
and
es crucial para
brick
entender los
factories
problemas de
are
los
key to
empresarios,
understand
qué es
the
lo que les
problems of
duele,
the
qué es lo que genera, por
entrepreneurs, what
ejemplo,
happened to
posibles
them,
barreras para poder
what can
llegar a
generate
encontrar
barriers to
unas
find
mejores condiciones de
better
producción,
conditions
y
of
asimismo
production,
también
and
dar a
that way
entender en esos espacios de
understand in
confianza
those
para que
trust
las
spaces
autoridades ambientales
before the
cómo llegar a
environmental
consensos de trabajo
authorities
y
to
de
how to
transparencia del conocimiento.
achieve
Por ejemplo, de cuáles son los beneficios que
consensus at
esperan
work and
a
transfer of
través del
knowledge. What are
desarrollo de
the
la articulación público-privada.
expectations through the association of public
Y
and
bueno,
private
digamos
companies?
que a final de cuentas todo esto tiene que quedar
In the end, it
desde
has
el
to
punto de
be
vista de política
in
pública.
a
Entonces, ese desarrollo de la
topic
política
related to
pública
public policies, and
basada
the
en
development of
datos
that based on data
presenta la posibilidad de
presents the
reducir
opportunity to
barreras
reduce
entre las
barriers
partes
between
interesadas,
the
entre el
interested
empresario
parts,
y
the,
entre la
the
autoridad ambiental.
entrepreneur, the
También en un momento
environmental
dado
authority, and
tendrá que entrar,
in
por
a
ejemplo,
moment we
el
could
consumidor,
talk
el
about
cliente de
the
ese producto,
consumer, the client,
y en
and the product,
conjunto se
and
pueden
together
evitar
we
costos
can
de
avoid
no acción,
costs
de no generar
without any
actividades que
action, to
produzcan la
not generate
contaminación,
activities that produce
externalidades
contamination,
que
those
a final de
external
cuentas
things
afectan
that in the
a la
end
sociedad.
will
Esto
affect the
permite también la
society. That
posibilidad de
allows us the
amplificar la
possibility
experiencia de
to
articulación
improve the
público-privada que pudimos
experience of
desarrollar con el sector
articulation
ladrillero
of
a
public
otros
and
sectores
private
productivos
companies
que pueden
to
ser
from the brick
están
producer
interesados
to
en
other sectors
en
that
este
could be
tipo de
interested in this
prácticas.
type of practices. Taking advantage of this valuable opportunity and taking into account what David says, we thank all the entrepreneurs that could be part of the uh, board to be in contact with us and take advantage of this. There's articulation in between public and private sectors, but the challenges that we have with sector and the opportunities that we have in the front of us. all of the entrepreneurs, we invite them to take part of the board. So Fabio, tell us what our friends from Nepal say. So Dr. Villa and Dr. Segat that are part of this event to give us your comments. So
the word is for you.
the floor is yours, Mr. Deep Segar.
Fabio, it's for me.
Para mí es la
Okay.
pregunta. Sí, claro que sí.
Actually, I was not getting the in the Spanish the language. Should I go for any comments or like what should I do?
¿Qué debo hacer entonces?
Your comments or
Sus
conclusions about
comentarios o
the
conclusiones acerca
process of
del
measurement.
proceso de medición.
Yeah, no, like the exchange program is really good, but like there are many technical difficulties still now. Many participants are waiting, and they have to like go through the like the sign up process, and I think many of are not being able to join this program. But I am really happy to see your results in the Colombia that you are doing. Is really such a nice and like very helpful. Those we are also trying to adopt here in Nepal also. Hopefully in the futures again we are like continuing this kind of work and can be shared to you, all of you. And thank you.
Y desde luego, gracias.
Dear Sagar, if I can ask you a question, have you have the opportunity to measure in kilns with use of biomass in Nepal or India?
Yeah. Basically, in Nepal, I think Suez sir has like raised the question to the live webinar also. We have also measured in the mixed scenario, not totally with the biomass, but with the coal and with the biomass also. We have to segregate the results based on the like the types of the biomass used and the properties of the biomass used. Till now, like that I have presented in my presentation, we have just only like focused on the fuel-based emission factor only, regardless of the whatever the fuel available over there. Though there are like the mixing of the fuels, basically biomass, basically the rich in sawdust and some agriculture residue. We didn't have like gone details in the like biomass segregated results. Now we are working on that. We have done a lot of works on that. Hopefully in the near future we can present the results on the basis of this.
Thank you, Sagar.
Señor Sagar,
Yep.
muchas gracias.
Thank you, Fabio.
Gracias a ustedes también.
A continuación, escucharemos
Now we're going
las
to
preguntas y los
listen
comentarios de nuestra
questions
compañera
and comments
Vidya
from
Pradam.
Vidya Pradam.
Vidya ma'am?
Dear Vidya,
Thank you, Fabio, and thank you,
Gracias
Kaim,
por su
CCAC,
la
and all the
CCAC y todos los
participants who are
participantes
listening to
que
this
están
webinar.
escuchando a este
Firstly,
seminario
I would like
web.
to,
Me
yes,
gustaría
can you
también-
hear me?
Bueno, ¿me
yes,
pueden
we can hear
escuchar
you.
bien?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sí, desde luego.
Okay, thank you so
Muy bien.
much.
Gracias por
And all the participants.
pues gracias a todos los participantes de nuevo.
Firstly, I would like to, yes, can you hear me? Okay. There's quite a lag in my, while I am speaking, but I think this is a very good program, and what you have done with the rat nose measurement is really good. And we are also trying to do this in Nepal, Pakistan, and hopefully like we will be able to do more in the coming days. So hopefully like
Así que esperamos también
at least
por lo menos,
through webinar we are able
hacerlo
to
por un
share
seminario
the
web, podemos
experience, and
nuestras
hopefully
experiencias y
that in
esperamos
near
también
future
que
we'll
en el
be
futuro
able to
cercano podamos
do meet face to face, and then we'll learn
conocernos
about
y
the clean
aprender
technology
acerca de las
and the
experiencias y
measurement
la tecnología,
styles
las mediciones que han
that we
ustedes
do
realizado,
in Colombia
que se hacen en
and
Colombia
in
y
Nepal,
también que
in
se hacen en
Asia.
Nepal
So I think like if we can make, the problem is the little bit language problem, but without, I think like that was the biggest problem, and we hope that in near future that we will get this resolved. And it was better than last time, and I hope that it will get better in the coming days as well, because we are also learning by doing. So I think in the near future we will really do well, as we are also refining the rat nose instrument. Likewise, our webinar will get better and better in the coming years. Thank you. I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Vidya.
Gracias.
Thanks to you and Mr. Sagar.
Gracias
Thank
a
you,
todos.
Fabio. Thank you all.
Gracias a todos nuestros participantes.
Thanks to all
Les
our
enviaremos a sus correos
participants. We're going to
electrónicos a
send
través
to
de su
your
registro
emails,
las
to your
presentaciones en
registry,
español
the
y en
presentations
inglés
in
según
Spanish and
corresponda.
English,
Nuevamente,
according to your
las
language,
preguntas que queden
and the
aún por
questions
realizarse,
that are
les
still
agradecemos utilizar el
ready to
chat
be made.
del
Thank you to
evento,
use the
está
chat in the
precisamente
event.
para ello.
It is for
A
that
todos
there.
muchísimas
And
gracias y
thanks
recordamos que
everyone.
nuestra próxima
And we're
sesión
reminded that
es el
your
3 de
next
noviembre
session, our next session is
bajo
on
la
November
misma
3rd under
metodología.
the same
Esperamos
methodology.
esta
And we
primera
hope that
sesión
this
técnica
first
hubiera sido de
technical
su agrado
session
y por
was
supuesto se cumplan las metas de
everything
esta
that you
transferencia. Así
expected,
que
and
quedamos
we
muy
comply with all
expectantes de
the
todas sus
goals
preguntas y
of this
comentarios.
transfer, and
Las
we will wait for
presentaciones se
your
las haremos llegar muy
comments,
prontamente y también
and the
estarán
presentations will
disponibles
be sent
en la
by
página
mail, and they will be available through
www.transferencialadrillera.com.
Bueno, por último, muchas gracias, Luisa, para
transferencia.com.
agradecerles
So,
a todos
Luisa,
por su
thank
tiempo,
everyone
su
for,
acompañamiento el
for
día de
your
hoy.
time and your
Recordarles
and be
que
here
cualquier
today,
duda,
and
pregunta o
any
inquietud, con todo gusto
question
pueden
or any doubt,
haciéndola llegar por el
you
medio
can
de correo
send it through
electrónico.
by
Y
or
bueno,
by
estamos
mail,
aquí para
and we are here
colaborarles y lo
to
que
help you,
necesiten con
and
todo gusto.
anything that you
Los
need,
esperamos en la
we'll
próxima
be
sesión
waiting for
y como
your
ya
questions,
comentaba
and we
Vidya,
will hope you
queremos ir
be
un poco más en el tema
in the
del
next session
portafolio de medidas
with
de
Dr. Vidya.
tecnologías
We will be
y
in
cómo todo este tema de
technologies and the
mediciones, la modelación y
measurement,
cómo todos estos resultados
modeling, and all the
terminan en una
results
política
will
pública y se
finish in
incluyen
public policies and will be
en el
included
sector de
in
políticas
the
públicas.
sector of
Muchísimas
public
gracias.
policies.
Finalmente, agradecer a la
Thanks again,
Coalición
and
de Áreas de
thanks to the
Infoclima, a la
Coalition
Corporación Ambiental
of
Empresarial y al
Clean
Ministerio
Air,
de Medio
the
Ambiente por todo su
Corporation
apoyo
of
en la realización de
Environment,
estos eventos. Gracias,
and
hasta la
the
próxima.
Chamber of
Que tengan
Commerce,
buen
and
día.
thanks, and have a good day.
Gracias.
Sector productivo del país. Entonces, este tipo de programas nos ha llevado a que el sector ladrillero se organice y que los empresarios, pequeños empresarios artesanales, empiecen a aliarse y a trabajar hacia un mismo objetivo.
Tener un puesto en una mesa que se discute mucha problemática que tenemos a nivel nacional.
Hemos podido crear sinergias entre cada uno de los gremios ladrilleros a nivel nacional.
Hemos podido plantear sobre la mesa nuestras propuestas para el cambio de políticas públicas.
Y qué gratificante poder saber y poder conocer el contexto de nuestro sector a nivel nacional.
El sector ladrillero en Colombia era una de las principales fuentes de material particulado que afectaba a la comunidad en temas respiratorios y cardiovasculares. Se reconoce el trabajo que ha tenido la CAEM, Corporación Ambiental Empresarial, que desde mucho tiempo atrás la iniciativa viene trabajando con el sector ladrillero y desde sus inicios ha aportado conocimiento técnico y nos ha permitido un acercamiento con personas en campo, con conocimiento y a través de identificación de tecnologías de reducción de emisiones.
A partir de ese momento, el ladrillero ha empezado a tener como un cambio de conciencia y de mentalidad de que es importante controlar las emisiones, pero además de eso, medirlas.
Pues todas las empresas estamos interesadas en tener pues unas emisiones más limpias.
Las mediciones nos dan una información técnica que nos permite a todos hablar en los mismos términos. Sin mediciones estamos hablando en abstracto.
Hemos, como país, reducido el número de hornos artesanales y promovido que se generen mayores actualizaciones tecnológicas que se ven representadas en reducciones de emisiones contaminantes.
Ya están empezando a construir chimeneas, a diseñar hornos como mejorados, haciéndoles de pronto una cúpula y dirigiendo todos los gases de la combustión a un punto, buscando la medición y el control.
Es una manera también de cuidar la salud de la comunidad que está a nuestro alrededor, como la de nosotros mismos.
Que nosotros como sector estemos más conscientes de la responsabilidad que tenemos y de los cumplimientos que tenemos que tener de la norma.
El sector ladrillero que representamos es un sector industrial, formal, sometido a la ley en toda su extensión desde el punto de vista de medio ambiente, de regulación económica.
A nivel internacional se reconoce el trabajo de Colombia, de la CAEM, en materia de las mediciones y el trabajo técnico y científico que se ha dado con el sector ladrillero.
Un agradecimiento especial a la Corporación Ambiental Empresarial, a la CAEM y a la Coalición de Clima y Aire Limpio por tener presente nuestro gremio.
Son más de 10 años en los que, con la ayuda de ellos, hemos logrado muchos de los procesos que hemos incorporado en nuestra organización.
Estar incluidos en la Mesa Ladrillera Nacional ha sido para nosotros, eso es un sueño hecho realidad.